When asked before the COVID-19 pandemic what issues kept business aviation executives up at night, more often than not, workforce would be the top answer. After a brief reprieve during the early days of COVID-19, those issues came roaring back with the complications that accompanied the pandemic. We brought together thought leaders on this issue to discuss what's happening now, whether industry efforts are helping to restore the pipeline of next generation workers, and what needs to be done for the future. Our participants included Katie Johnson, Chief People Officer for Westar Aviation, Tanya Sudda, Head of U.S. Strategy for Bombardier, Cheryl Barden, President and CEO of Aviation Personnel International, and Melissa Fitzgerald-Drew, Executive Vice President of Client Services for Solaris. Westar Aviation sponsored this roundtable. Here are some of the highlights from that discussion. What are your concerns about workforce supply today?
So, the real issue boils down to there's simply not enough of the workforce available, which is really magnified by there's such a robust demand for talent. It's important that I think we remember that this is not something that just developed post-COVID. It's really been a lingering challenge that has started, well before the pandemic. And I think that the issue, with not just having enough talent is maybe more better stated as a lack of experienced, aircraft maintenance technicians. And that's really what keeps me up at night is that, there's a good movement we're seeing within the FAA certifying, more mechanics than what we've seen in the past. But there's still that skills gap. The newer aircraft are more modern. They have different systems. They're more complex. And so some of those skills are just not learned during the course of going to college and getting your license. And so that's really the crux of it is not enough workforce and not enough of the skilled specific aircraft maintenance technicians.
Yes, I completely agree with what Katie just summarized, and I'm seeing the same thing. In particular, the technician, the A&P technician, that is a key area of challenge for us. And as Katie mentioned, it's something we've seen coming as an industry. We've had many people, start to transition into the retirement phase, and it's something that I feel like the industry as a whole, we've seen it coming. Then we had the pandemic, which created that many more labor shortages. And at the same time, we had increased demand in our industry. For us, it seems like one of the biggest challenges we have right now is that experience gap. So we have several employees that I would say are like at that 20 or more years of experience. And we have several employees that I would say are brand new, recently certified as an A&P. It's that in between and trying to figure out and develop strategies to try to help mitigate that skills gap.
It's a very competitive world right now. And on the pilot side, and I'm as equally concerned on the maintenance side, but on the pilot side, we have just been through and are now maybe having a little bit of a slowdown in what was a perfect storm that really, as Katie said, this has been coming for a long time on the maintenance side. On the pilot side, this pilot shortage has been coming, basically it started, the whole root of it started at 9/11 and then went further on when we increased the retirement age for pilots and just basically stagnated any growth or matriculation through a progression-based environment with the airlines until about 2017, where everything started to change. And so it is a very competitive world, and our airlines are trying to solve this through compensation, through very high compensation, which has put incredible pressure on our flight departments, be they both Part 91, 135, internal managed, or through a management company. There's incredible pressure, not only on compensation for a pilot, but also on work-life balance or work-life integration. And so what we've had to see is that more and more of our Part 91, more and more of our individual operators are having to increase compensation and increase headcount in order to in order to retain talent, and then finding new talent is a real challenge. So kind of one of the things that keeps me up at night is new talent, whereas we used to find much of our new talent either coming out of the military or coming out of the regional carriers because they were stagnated and not able to move up into the pipeline. Those people are going up into the pipeline so fast now that whereas that was what came to business aviation, and we really thrived on the experience that was gained through either of those two avenues. We don't have that anymore. So where's the 30-year-old entering our marketplace today? And where is he or she as a pilot coming from?
So we are seeing a limited talent pool amongst all professionals with aviation, both maintenance technicians, pilots, but also the overhead staff as well. We're looking into different ways to bridge the gap between new and experienced professionals and what we consider a qualified technician or a qualified pilot that would be entering the workforce. And I think the problem started, like Cheryl said, in 2017, but in our purview, when we're looking at the future, about 30% of our overall professionals within our company will be retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. So the problem's continuing to increase and the talent pool is continuing to be limited. About 15% of our pilots are in that group where they will be exiting the industry in about 5 to 10 years. So it's a continuing problem where we need to look at resources where we can increase the young professionals that are in maybe the regionals or the Air Force or military organizations that can come into our industry. And it's how do we get them the experience where our owners mainly will consider them to be experienced enough to fly their heavy jets.
What is the quandary about experience needs, and how is this affecting business? And talk a little about the importance of retention.
We hired about 280 pilots the past 2 years alone. And now we're finding that the talent pool that's qualified, what we consider qualified, so around 4,000 hours and maybe 10 years of corporate aviation experience would be what most aircraft owners are looking for these days. And that talent pool is extremely limited. So we are getting a lot of applicants who have, around 2,000 hours or 1,000 hours trying to enter the industry. And unfortunately for a company like Solaris, where the majority of our 330 aircraft are heavy aircraft and the requirements just aren't there. So it's an increasing issue, and it's both on the pilot front and the technician front.
I want to come back to a piece that we were talking about. Melissa, you used a factor of 4,000 hours, that we need an experienced pilot with 4,000 hours. Well, where do you get that time? And just recently, I was working with a young pilot who is almost at 3,000 hours. And works in corporate America for a management company. And how it takes so long. If you're flying just 300 hours a year, it takes 4 years, 3+ years to build 1,000 hours, and 300 is a heck of a lot of hours for a Part 91 pilot to be flying. And so I think we've got also some paradigm changes that have to be made around training, because we can see the military train fantastic pilots, and the military pilots come out without 3,000 hours. And the military pilots are trained to an exceptional level, and that they're flying top brass of the military. They're flying the CEOs of the military at less than 1,000 hours. It's really, in a large corporate environment, you have compensation, you have internal equity, you have salary bands, and that compensation is getting to a point that is almost unsustainable in that corporate environment, in those bands, et cetera. And so that I think is probably one of the hardest things that an organization is dealing with today, as well as making sure that there is that life balance or work-life integration, meaning we've got some hard days off. Everybody knows that they have days off, and they know it in advance, not in the rear view mirror. So I think some of the paradigms that have been part of business aviation for years and years and years are they're changing rapidly. And if leadership within the flight department isn't changing and embracing those changes and sticking with the old way we've always done it, then that's going to be an organization that really is going to have a very, very difficult time and probably have a revolving door. So when we have people who come to us and say, no, we don't offer any hard days off, you're on 24/7 call, we're like, you're not competitive. I can't pull a magic, I can't pull a rabbit out of a hat for you because of that. You're totally uncompetitive, and this is what you must do in order to have the talent there. And of course, the worst thing ever is to say to the CEO, I'm sorry, we can't go because we don't have enough crew to staff your trip, to crew your trip. And you get to a point where when you've been pushed too much that, somebody says uncle somewhere along the way and votes with their feet. And then you've got the situation of how do I replace them? And that has been, the whole replacing people has been a really critical, another critical shift, which is a shift that, 4 or 5 years ago, pre-pandemic, our clients were always hiring for fit and training for skill. And of course, then when things happened during the pandemic and we could not get training slots, we ended up hiring that type-rated pilot. And that was the whole key, was to find somebody that could plug in to my Challenger or whatever it is. And I think from that, perhaps that we could see some fallout in our flight departments, because did we hire the right person or did we hire the typed person?
That's such an interesting, point you bring up, Cheryl. Westar has recently started to embrace more of the, hiring for, personality fit and training for the specific experience. As, sometimes what we find is that, when you do find that highly experienced person and you hire them because they're very experienced, that experience sometimes is overshadowed by some of the behaviors that they bring. And so while we've educated our managers about, it's great to see some of the inexperienced talent is becoming more available, they do get a little hesitant about hiring, too many inexperienced people. And so we've been able to help them overcome that by helping them see the personality, fit, really defining what are some of those characteristics that we're looking for. And what we've seen is that when we hire for, the right behavioral attributes, we're seeing that they're actually soaking up and learning more of the skills. And that's actually presenting, better. But, you also made a really good point about the work-life integration. And I just wanted to, touch on that, Carrie. Being in a 145, Part 145 environment, we too have seen that same challenge, and that we really are working with our managers to help them think differently and think about if somebody wants to work 3 days a week or if they want to work 4 days a week, and we still benefit from, getting that the hours and their time, then let's be open to thinking about, alternative work schedules, because that's part of, I think, what is helping us attract new people into the industry, is when they can realize that, hey, they don't have to work, 5-6 days a week. They can have the opportunity to work 3 or 4 days a week and also still work overtime. It really just helps them embrace more of that, Cheryl said it great, that work-life, integration.
We have a program in place where our current crew members and also per diem crew members, we get a lot of our per diems coming to us wanting full-time positions, but also referring people that they've flown with in the industry. A lot of this is based on education. So along what Cheryl said, ensuring that not only the crew members understand the quality of life that each flight department provides, but the aircraft owner as well, educating our clients on retention and what that looks like. Also, we talk a lot about replacement value and replacement costs when it comes to crew members, because there is a cost associated to having attrition and high attrition within a flight department. And then providing the CAMs, our client aviation managers, the leads of the flight department, the education to manage effectively to ensure that the crew that are within their own team and their own organization want to stay on board in the flight department, and coming to Solaris with the issues at hand prior to them getting to be too big, whether it's the schedule, compensation, quality of life is a big one. We put programs in place like a retention bonus plan for its deferred compensation is what it's referred to. And it's kind of along the lines of having an additional 401k plan for the crew members. So if they stay with an account for a certain period of time, that they will get paid out, a value of money, which is assisting us in keeping crew members within a certain account for a period of time. But we also have put in programs where we bring on younger talent into, say, a Challenger 300, and then they know that in the future they can move within the organization to receive promotions, which I think is very important for new crew members coming into our organization, knowing that there is a promotion in their future, because for crew members, receiving a promotion is basically receiving a new type rating within their career. So we're trying to put avenues in place and then promote those within our organization so people know that there's a pathway forward to continue their career within Solaris.
What are some of the innovative ways you've used to attract talent?
And so each one of our mini flight departments, as I like to refer to them as, has their own dedicated maintenance supervisor. So we have somebody for each aircraft maintaining the maintenance from a broader perspective. What we're seeing is, again, a limited talent pool. In our perspective, the most important thing we could do right now as an industry is go into these smaller A&P schools and colleges and educate professionals on what business aviation is. Oftentimes, and I was speaking with our director of maintenance yesterday about this, oftentimes when college students or people in A&P school, they don't actually know what business aviation is. I think the airlines do a really good job of educating and going in and educating them of where they can, get a contract 6 months prior to them graduating school. And it's a sure thing and a known salary, where we don't have the ability to do that. We also don't have the ability to hire right out of A&P school. So we actually rely on companies like Bombardier or Westar to bring in younger talent and educate them. So in the future, they can, make the promotion into a role as a maintenance supervisor. So I think as an industry, we should come up with better solutions for younger talent coming out of these schools, bridge programs, maybe with Westar, Bombardier, where management companies can tap into those resources. So I think there's like a talent gap, a bridge in education that we need to do as an industry as a whole.
Very similar to Bombardier, we've grown our footprint across the United States, opened new hangars, started off, new greenfield sites. So, we have really had my 10-year career at Westar has really been about strategically building for the future talent that we know we're going to need. And so, we've started going back years ago with formalizing our apprenticeship program with the Department of Labor. More recently, we're starting to identify to people what the skills are that they need to know in order to grow internally. Thinking about, part of the problem is people don't necessarily know what they should be doing. And so providing that clarity has certainly been, helping. But also we looked at it and said, okay, what we've done in the past is great, but it's not necessarily going to close the talent gap in the future. And that's what led us to, deepen our relationships with not only industry, but also partnering with our community workforce innovation boards, community colleges. And that's how we ended up creating Westar Aviation Academy, which is where we went to market and we, recruited people that have a mechanical aptitude, that have the right behavioral, attributes to be successful as a mechanic. And, we hired them as a full-time employee to go to school for 7 months. And this school is on site at Westar. It is in full partnership with Southwestern Illinois College, who is actually teaching their airframe program, coupled with facilitating the Choose Aerospace Generals. And so what happens is we've expanded our access to getting 25 licensed mechanics by simply removing the barriers to be able to get into the program by not having to work full-time and go to school full-time. We pay them a living wage. They earn benefits. We also pay the cost of the tuition for SWIC as well. And then to really prevent that skills gap, I should say, we spend the last, several weeks of the academy where we actually are in a learning environment that is not part of our active hangar. We have a dedicated aircraft. We have all of our systems, our work order management systems, our forms, our parts, our procedures, to where the students can now apply everything they've learned and really work in a controlled environment to apply all their skills to work before they graduate from the academy, test with the FAA and obtain their airframe license. And now they go into the workforce to begin working in that active environment. And they have that familiarity with not only the knowledge, but also the skills, and have been able to demonstrate and learn in a safe environment. And then on the job, they continue to get training and supported to go on and obtain their power plant license as well. But this has really been a key part of our future growth, is really just trying to understand, what are some of the barriers that are preventing more people from going into college, and also understanding some of the pain points that the colleges have had, which is not all the students that enroll are actually graduating, because there is some of the financial constraints that, precludes them. So that's really been our current, focus, is not to think about we've done enough in the past, but what more can we do to really, unite with the industry associations and really try to make this a sustainable model as we look for the future.
Some of the things that we've done at Bombardier is we have teamed with the Department of Defense on the Skill Bridge program. This is a pretty cool program. It gives us access to experienced military technicians, and we're able then to transition or help them transition into civilian positions on our line. So that's a program I'm very, very proud that we're participating in. Another thing that we've done is we've teamed with Captain Barrington Irving. He's our talent ambassador. He's done a great job of generating that interest in STEM at the very young ages, as well as he's working to help with training programs for our A&P technicians. As far as things specifically with Bombardier, another thing that I just want to share, similar to what Katie said, is we did launch the first state of Kansas registered A&P technician program here in Wichita. That was launched in collaboration with WSU Tech, Wichita State University here locally. So we launched this A&P program. It is set up to where we are extending offers to the mechanics on day one. They're fully paid by Bombardier. They spend a day or two in the classroom. The rest of the time they're on site, and their instructor moves with the classroom. So he's either helping us here on site with the training and development of these employees, or helping them in the classroom themselves. It's a great opportunity for us. We're super excited about it. And are very excited to see what the future holds as far as more and more of these types of programs throughout the U.S.
Does the industry share a responsibility to help improve the situation?
When you look at who we are now competing against for talent, let's name them. United, UPS, FedEx, all of these big organizations, they recruit huge numbers of pilots and technicians and flight attendants every single year. Our business aviation groups, like our Part 91 flight departments, they might recruit a pilot every 5 years. And so we are a group of lots of smaller hiring entities in relation to who we're competing against for talent. And we have no unified voice. Everything that I believe we do is on a grassroots basis. Even with what Bombardier might be doing and some of these others, how can we compete with United, with Delta, with Southwest? And so I've always been an advocate that we need a true umbrella program to recruit and compete and tell the business aviation, general aviation story in a unified way across our country. And we don't have that. We have lots of folks doing their own little thing and no coordinated effort or coordinated message.
Starting with a very young talent pool and getting out there and educating high schoolers, college students on what business aviation is, it should be a united front from all of us. And spending more time together speaking with younger talent, I think, will assist us in 10 years from now.
And Melissa, I would agree with you on that, especially I've always been very much to educate our high school guidance counselors. And I think many times when young people go to their guidance counselor and say, I want to be in aviation, especially a woman who says, I want to be a pilot, they get directed elsewhere because that guidance counselor knows nothing and or knows very little. And of course, there are some wonderful ones that do. I'm not, and we've got some of these wonderful aviation academies and aviation high schools. But then again, those aviation high schools, they're all, everything is airline.
I, definitely agree with everybody that this has really got to be a collaborative approach. And Westar has really started that, through our deepening our partnerships with the Aviation Technician Education Council and specifically Choose Aerospace. Cheryl just talking about, how do we get to the high school guidance counselors and educate them? That's one of the things that Westar has been partnering not just with Choose Aerospace, but also with our local community, K through 12 educators. We presented to a group of educators a few months ago about what Choose Aerospace offers, which is a ready-to-go aviation maintenance, general education, 500 hours that can be taught in the high school environment. It's, virtual reality, augmented reality. It's developed by, really robust, educators within the industry. And it's designed to help people who don't know about aviation to be able to teach it. They have teacher kits. They have teacher workshops. They really have truly thought of every angle that would need to be addressed to help somebody who's not an aviation expert be able to learn, promote it, and teach the program. And what that does is it obviously creates more awareness. It creates, a stronger, pipeline. But it's also similar to how, when we were in high school, we could take college algebra and go to college, and that counted as, college credit. Well, some of the A&P schools are starting to recognize that they can build on the Choose Aerospace program, and the students that graduate high school completing that can now test for their generals and start into an A&P program and already have 10 weeks of the program completed. And so Westar has really benefited by partnering with Choose Aerospace to not only help our communities, but we also incorporated the Choose Aerospace curriculum into our internal Westar Academy model. So that way, as we think of this, more broadly, we want to get the community involved. We want to also show them that there is a direct path from high school to work that supports, some of these enhancements that they can make within that curriculum at the high school levels.
I think so much of the work that we have to do is to tell our story. And I agree, it's a collective effort as an industry to tell that story. I think you mentioned MBAA, Cheryl did as well. They are making huge progress in doing that from an industry standpoint. But of course, we all have work to do, right? And it's not just one agency. It's all of us have to come to the table and tell that story. One of the things that we just recently did, I mentioned that we've collaborated with Captain Barrington Irving. He came in, a few of you were actually at our safety stand down and may have had a chance to meet him. He came in to support that event. And then while I was here, he went and visited a local high school, actually I should say middle school, and presented to around 600 students. It was a Title I school, had a chance to really excite the audience about this industry in this field. And I'll tell you, sitting in that audience myself and watching those kids jump out of their seats with questions, we need so much more of that, right? We need to engage them very young. We need to get them excited about it. I think this is absolutely imperative.
What are the results of these efforts?
We are actually seeing a slight uptick in more licensed technicians becoming available. What I would say is it's certainly not enough to fill the pipeline, but it is really interesting to see that, the colleges are starting to have, more graduates. We're starting to see more interest in students going into that career field. So I think we're seeing good momentum. But I think we need to realize that momentum generated because we all started talking about this problem several years ago. And so we just need to make sure as an industry that we don't feel good that the problem is solved because we've seen maybe, 2% more technicians becoming certified than the past year. I think we all need to make sure that we continue to find out how are we generating this interest and what can we as, industry employers do with other associations and the educational systems to continue generating that interest, because otherwise we're going to rally around and feel like we have a good problem, and then all of a sudden the enrollments are going to back down and we're not going to see the pipeline.
I think the trend is we're seeing more and more interest in the pipeline. Right. I think some of the work that we've done is starting to take hold. And when I say we, I mean the industry as a whole. I think we're getting more and more word out there to the younger populations around how exciting this field is, what the opportunities are. However, to your point, completely agree. I mean, we are working to grow our business significantly, and to be faced with the challenges already for what we all recognize as a shortage in workforce, what we all recognize as very competitive, salaries and whatnot for our employees. It's an area we've got to stay very focused on. And I think we've taken some really good steps at Bombardier, and it's just going to take some time to get us through there. But the trend is in the right direction.